Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Braxton College's podcast. We're here the first and the third Wednesday of every month. We want to thank everybody that joined us a couple weeks ago, where we talked about promotional testing and all the options for both agencies and for the providers. We got a lot of great feedback. Again, keep sending us those ideas so we can continue to meet whatever needs and discuss what you need in both fire, EMS, nursing, leadership, whatever we can bring to you. So today's December 7th, Pearl Harbor Memorial Day or Remembrance Day. So we want to reach out, of course, to all the current and past veterans. We want to thank you for what you do every day and keeping us safe. So appreciate you for sure. But today we're here to talk about training, right? As a college, we do training every day. It is a little different, obviously, than what we're going to talk about tonight in the fire and EMS services and the challenges that we have in training in general. So tonight I have Captain Javier Rodriguez and Captain Jason Torlucci, and we'll let them kind of introduce themselves and we'll get right in it. So Captain Rodriguez, I see you're unmiked. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Name is Javier Rodriguez, been proudly serving North Lauderdale Fire Rescue now for about 13 years, going on 13 years, and been basically assisting our department with training for the past 2 years.
Awesome. I think Jason just disappeared, right? For a second. Technical difficulties. So we appreciate you coming on. So here's Jason. If you can introduce yourself.
Just came to my door.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Captain Torlucci with Palm Beach County Fire Rescue. I'm in the training division. I'm the compliance officer.
Awesome. So yeah, you were breaking up just a little bit there, but so there's an interesting group, right? So we have Captain Torlucci in the training division of Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, which is a very large agency. Congratulations again on your ISO 1. So that's an incredible feat. That's a big deal. So we want to make sure that we recognize that and what he has to offer. For those of you that are online here, they had quite a few challenges, obviously, and they were able to get through those. So we also have Captain Dan Moran that's going to be joining us in just a second. I see him coming on right now. And we'll kind of go around the group here, and we're going to talk about a few things when it comes to training in general. So, again, ISO is one. That's the obvious one when we talk about fire, right? So some of the people that are watching tonight and people that had some questions for us, how do we meet those challenges? So, let's talk first, Javi, right? So Captain Rodriguez, when we talk about ISO, you're with a smaller agency with not a big training division, which is the majority of the fire rescue agencies that are around the country, right? So, how can you meet those hours? How do you plan for it? What are some of your challenges from a smaller entity?
As a small department, we have the luxury of at least communicating pretty easily within officer to officer, captain to captain. And we depend highly on our captains to do a lot of company training with their own crews. So typically we try to set out a couple of scenarios or objectives to try to be met for the month. And we've broken it down to we need at least 16 hours a month to kind of meet those hours for the year. So far we've been doing pretty good with that. And with Target Solutions, obviously that kind of helps with the documentation. And we're kind of starting to turn that bridge around, make that turn to not just utilizing Target Solutions, but actually using our own guys to kind of do some hands-on more training.
Right. And I think one of the the personnel, I don't care if you're in fire, you're EMS, you're in nursing, you're in anything, you want training. People do want it, right? Every time they go to a training event, people are like, we need to do this more, right? We want to train
Absolutely.
more. But it's time consuming. It's staff driven. It costs money sometimes. So we'll talk about how to get around some of those things. So people want training and you can get creative. So Captain Torlucci, talking about you in a much larger entity. I know your department has company training. Of course, your station officers conduct a lot of that. So when you look at, let's talk about ISO in general, what do you feel how can you implement in such a large entity? First of all, how many personnel do you have? Line personnel.
We're about 1,480 combat.
Okay, so when I have to train 1,400 people, where do you start?
So here's where we went with ISO. We're doing something probably a lot of other departments are not doing. So when you're doing when you're talking about company training, and you're, at the end of the year when you're getting inspected to run a report, and the problem you have with officers, a lot of them doesn't understand what is truly company training. Sometimes they'll put in forestry. Sometimes I've seen dive rescue in there. And it doesn't matter how many lectures or classes I teach. It's got to be structured firefighting. If it's not structured firefighting, it's not company training. So here's how we fix that.
You put this month, this is what you're doing and how to log it in and what the objectives are for each one of those?
Almost. So we have in Target Solutions one activity. It's called company training, and it's under there has 60 laid out skills. So each month we tell you're going to do number 4, 7, 15, 36. So this prevents the person from inputting the wrong information. All these skills or drills are approved by ISO.
Okay.
That's how we got away with it. When we ran a report and he looked at it, he couldn't look at our company training and say, well, no, this isn't ISO. This isn't ISO. We already have 60 things out there. And again, this prevents, our officers sometimes are not the best spellers. Sometimes they'll put all caps lock in.
Right.
No. But when I run a report, everyone's going to have the same type of training. And ISO accepts this.
So I think the biggest thing, what we see, some people get very creative, whatever your documentation method is, whether that be Vector Solutions or any other platform, right, that people are documenting training. So, we try and do so much. We want to do this, and it backfires on you. We create 50 different categories of training, and then it's hard to reel that right back in. That doesn't mean you can't train in 50 different things, but how you document it is really going to be important. So I like the objectives. I like the one thing that you can put under company training, and it meets it all. You can send out monthly objectives. It's still company training, right? So that prevents people from putting in different things that may not be able to count when you run such a large report with such a large entity. Smaller agencies may be using an Excel spreadsheet. Really, you can document it how you want to document it with some attendance and roles and things like that. So, you don't need the big, elaborate online program. If you have it, absolutely use it, which is, and that's great. So, ISO is pretty clear of what you need to do. So we talk about the 16 hours of training. And you have to have company training and driver training and new driver training and new company training and, all of those type of things. So those categories are tough to meet. That is a lot of training, and just doing it online really isn't good enough. We do have to do a lot of things in person. So how many people, Jason, are in your training division?
Probably about in the training division.
How many? You just broke up.
10.
10?
About 10.
10 for 1,400 people. So that's one for every 140. So for those agencies that are watching, saying, hey, the big people, big organizations are different. They have full training divisions. You have to put it into perspective. If you have one person in training or no one in training, and maybe it's the company officer levels that are doing that, it can be done. You do need one person just kind of organize some things, but you're looking at a large agency as one for every 140 combat personnel. There's not a perfect system, right? So 10 is not a whole lot when you're managing that many people, right? So, those are some of the challenges. To me, when we do things like this, we look at these podcasts and we look at regions. If I wanted to do a training event for my agency or at our school to serve that area, I reach out to the content experts, right? I reach out to them saying, can you give me a day, where I can use your expertise, because we're not experts in everything. This field is very dependent on our relationships that we have with each other. And so for those that are listening, you got to reach out, right? If we need to do joint training, if I give you a day, you give me a day, the third person comes in, we immediately just had 3 or 4 days of high quality training that really at no cost. Yeah, you're bringing in outside people, but we do each other favors all the time. As long as that isn't your monthly training plan, it works, and it works very, very well. Captain Rodriguez, what do you think about that? How would you conduct that multi-agency?
For a smaller department, definitely networking is key to trying to get some efficient training. At North Lauderdale, we're all a bunch of small little departments. So not only does it benefit our ISO hours, but it's like a meet and greet with these other agencies, and we're going to be working with them on the fire ground. So That's always good to utilize the multi-agencies. And again, just networking is key. Like, we recently started doing some search and rescue training based on the fact that we know one of our neighboring departments has a maze. So we reached out to them. They let us use their facility, and there we had it. Like 4 or 5 hours of search and rescue training, run through Mayday drills and such. But when it comes to like live fire training, obviously we'll try to utilize some of the academies. We don't have a burn unit or anything like that. So even with that, we can kind of team up with our neighboring departments to kind of, first of all, budgeting, right? Financing, make it a little bit cheaper. And we all kind of get to go and play and meet our hours and train and have fun,
So Captain Torlucci, you have any ideas? Multi-agency training. You guys don't call too many agencies unless you're on border areas within your county. But, how do you accomplish that?
Well, it's like today, we actually had we had Delray Beach, West Palm, and North Palm at our facility today. So that goes for our automatic aid training. So luckily we're centered in the middle of Palm Beach County. So, we're right, south can come up, north can come down. We're right in the middle. But I mean, again, with automatic aid training, they like to come to our facility because we have everything. And so like we met all our automatic aid training for the quarter. Okay.
Right. And you document, and I guess your crews are involved in that as well, right? So you can, and everybody documents it, every agency that's there.
You cut out for a second?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
I said every agency that's there also gets credit for that, automatic aid training that's required.
Absolutely. They get automatic aid and facility training, depending on how they document it.
So let's switch gears a little bit. So we know the numbers we need. And sometimes we accomplish that online. We do some different things here and there. But, what are some of the unique things that we would want to do? Some of the uniqueness that we could use to train. And what I'm getting at is, whether that be props, how can I do something that's different? How can I prepare people a little bit more from just doing the standard training they're going to do every day or every month? How can I get more creative? For the most part, training divisions are like, hey, just go make it happen, right? And we can make it happen. But you also want to make it enjoyable. You want to make it practical. You don't want to, drive everybody to the ground all the time. Obviously, you have live burns, and that's you got to do that. But day-to-day training, Chief Moran, welcome. You're still on mute, but if you want to introduce yourself real quick, I'm not sure if you heard the last question, but how can you guys? How do you meet that special need of making training yours, unique, special to you guys, where you can make it more practical?
Hey, how you doing? First of all, thanks for having me on. Yeah, Danny Moran, Battalion Chief with City Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue. Sorry, I'm on duty, so I get the radio blaring in the back. But yeah, as far as the question goes, how do you make training unique?
How do you make it yours? How do you make yours? Listen, everyone can do rope and ladder and hose evolutions and that, but Fort Lauderdale may do it a different way. Fort Lauderdale has different buildings, different structures, different hose loads. How do you make that where it's more practical for you?
I think the best thing that our guys do to make it theirs and make it unique for them is that they're always looking for opportunities to train. So when you're on an EMS run, like you just said, like we have different buildings than other people have, but we also have the same buildings that everybody else has too. And the same buildings present the same challenges no matter what city they're in. And I just left the firehouse. We were talking about high-rise things, and when are you going to find out information about a high-rise building? What your challenges are going to be. You're going to find out on the medical runs, hopefully, not when the building is on fire. So that's how they're making it unique. And one thing that we really stress here is that we make sure that the company officer understands that they set the tone in their firehouses. And the training bureau, I was listening to you guys before talking about like target solutions and monthly things that get put out on computers and things. All of those are great and necessary to check boxes so that you can get things like ISO certifications and stuff right. But when it comes down to it, you could have the stickers on your truck and you can have all the hours logged in target solutions for all the members. But when there's smoke showing from a building, if the guys don't know how to force a door, stretch a line, throw a ladder, and perform a search, then all of the numbers don't mean anything. And I think we stress that so much to our company officers and stress how important just the basics of fire training or any kind of training really is, whether it's basics of EMS or whether it's basics of fire. Nothing happens after that if you don't do the basics well. And I think our company officers really embrace that. We have a very young department. A lot of new people have joined our department recently, and I think that our company officers understand that they can really control the future of the fire department with how they set the tone in the firehouse and their views on training. And when they go out on medical runs, they're not just getting back in the truck and leaving. They'll ask the guy in the back seat, how many rooms did you pass before we got to the room where the patient was, or where was the kitchen in the house? Did you notice this? Did you notice that? And they talk about things, and it just it generates discussion, and discussion.
It generates a mindset, right? It generates a mindset. If that's the way that they think all the time, then on training evolutions, they're going to say, well, what about this? This is what I've seen in some of our buildings. So that's a great point. I worked with someone 25 years ago that would knock at a door and kind of move to the side all the time. Mm-hmm. And he was a cop before he was a fireman. It was ingrained in him. And he was always the last one in the house. He would knock on the door. They opened it. Everybody else went in. I'm like, dude, he goes, well, why am I going to rush in? I don't want to be the first one in there. We walk in the wrong houses. It's habit. Like you're saying, point out. And that's a great point for company officers to talk to their firefighters. How many doors did you just walk past? What would be your secondary means of egress? And they don't think about it until we're doing fire training. But we should be doing fire training just in conversation at all times. So that's a great point. And, for those that are maybe in smaller agencies or don't take advantage of real training programs, if you've never been to FDIC, if you're in the state of Florida, Fort Lauderdale Fire Expo, Orlando Fire Expo, to go to those and see how everybody else does it, you can think outside of the box and come back and implement that within your agency for really not a big economic impact. It's, hey, I just learned this and I want to take it to everybody. So I think everybody's eager to learn. That's great points. But leadership sets the tone, right? So as you guys are doing these training, so in larger agencies, Fort Lauderdale, how many combat personnel do you guys have right now in Fort Lauderdale?
Well, we have about 450 or so members. Okay. Each shift, we have the 3 shifts, A, B, and C. Each shift, 130 and change on them. So
when you're doing those training exercises and you're doing whatever it is, who logs in the training hours? Is that the company officer for you guys?
Yeah, the company officer will log in training hours for the crew when they do stuff like that.
With direction, I would assume, of what category. And Captain Torlucci, I know you went through this like crazy over, in your agency as well. But, and your company officers do it as well, Jason?
Yes, they do the daily company trainings, but every year we do 6 mandatory drills at headquarters, and only I record those trainings. So then I can run a left train list saying, hey, these 20 guys still need to come.
Okay.
So we try to go between 95 and 97% compliance on all our on-duty training.
Oof. That's a big task. All right. So let's talk about, let's switch gears just a little bit to EMS. EMS in the state of Florida is pretty straightforward. 32 hours, pretty much anything that your medical director approves of, you're good to go. But that doesn't keep us at the top level of where we need to be. Fire normally, I don't want to say gets preference, but fire normally moves up in that because we're very clear on what we need to do, right? We need to do 16 hours a month, and you can only put so much in there, right? So, when we look at EMS, I think we can always look outside the box and do different things in training, but that normally falls to the wayside. How can we implement both? Is there a way that in your agencies you can be doing fire training and do EMS at the same time in the same evolution? Or is that just too much? Are we muddying the waters?
You want us to just answer, or
Yeah. What do you think?
I think doing them together would definitely muddy the waters. I think the most effective training really is done in 30 minutes or less, depending on what it's tabletop or whether it's a hands-on drill. There's only a certain amount of time before you start losing people's attention and motivation. And then when you combine fire and EMS into one drill, I think it would muddy the waters. But I think it's definitely impossible to do EMS training every single day. That's what we're doing the most out there on the streets. And, we're having discussions right now internally about how do we increase our ROSC numbers in cardiac arrest. And really, like, what's the answer? It's the same answer as if, I told one of the chiefs that we were having this discussion with, and they said, how do we make this seem important and relative for guys to want to train and do stuff on? I said, well, what would we do if all of a sudden we noticed that all of our room and content fires were all of a sudden going to 2-alarm fires? And we started losing houses left and right. We're like, the fires aren't that much bigger. What happens? We're losing the buildings all of a sudden. Well, if we're not getting our ROSC numbers up, it's the same concept where there's a part of our profession where we can improve. And the only way it's going to improve is with good, realistic, hands-on training. And that would be a real life scenario. Guys, you're getting dispatched to a call. You go in and you've got, a mannequin laying on the floor. You've got a living, breathing person that's acting like a patient that they can talk to. And then they go into cardiac arrest and the mannequin's on the floor and they have to deal with it. And they deal with it. They treat it, throw them on the stretcher, bring the stretcher to the truck, act like they're driving to the hospital, do all the stuff, and call it a day. And, you can get so much out of that in 20 minutes, then you'd get a lot more out of that.
One scenario, right? One scenario where we work as a team to do that. That gets back to that leadership, right? Where we start and saying, wherever that company officer is, bringing the importance of that. And as long as it's short, those 20, 30 minutes is good, highly impactful. What do you think, Cap? Torlucci, how do you guys, I know you have a pretty robust EMS division, right? And that's
back to the thing, like we tried to, about a year or two ago, we did a drill with EMS in it, and it was very taxing. You had to have, we had an EMS, you had all your EMS instructors there, then you had your fire instructors there. It was hard to run that scenario.
Yeah.
So I've never really done another one like that.
So I think from a training officer, and I'll get your comments, Javi, in just a second, but as a training officer, if you're if you're watching and you're a staff training officer and you're in the room, get out and run a call. Get out and see, because to me, that it's not judging what you're doing. It's looking and saying, hey, I think this is where areas that we could improve upon, and then create the training dynamic. The shotgun approach of, hey, we need to start training here without some valid data is just a shotgun approach. Like you said, Chief Moran, of targeting. If our goal is ROSC rates, first of all, everybody in the department needs to know what our current ROSC rates is. And this is what we're doing, and this is our goal, and this is how we're going to achieve it. And they might accept that a little bit more. And the fire relation is perfect. Chief Rodriguez, or Captain Rodriguez, what do you have to comment on that EMS training?
With the EMS training, I do believe that there is a place for EMS and fire to kind of mix. And for me, the biggest evolution really to run that I kind of find it of importance is a RIT scenario, going into a mayday, going into a RIT, bringing out that firefighter outside, getting them out of gear and running them through that second portion. Like, what happens after you get out of the building, right? Because we're all medics there on scene still. So, but breaking that evolution down has to be done in pieces. right? Going through your RIT operation, going through your Mayday, and then going down to, okay, now the guy's outside the building. What are we going to do? That's gonna take a few days of training, right? Maybe January you do RIT with a Mayday, and then in February you go ahead and run the down firefighter CPR, and then in March you go ahead and do the entire evolution as one piece.
Right, and it should be quick at that point, right?
Yeah.
We're just kind of reiterating what we've already done.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, where I see that we try and go 0 to 100 too quickly, right? We want to do an evolution and we want to accomplish all of it, and you know, and we're not putting it in those perspectives of, you know, let's do this step 1 first this month or this week. Maybe next week we'll do step 2, and then by the end we should be proficient, because people are going to make mistakes on any evolution we do, right? I don't care if it's EMS or fire, we're going to make mistakes. And those are the things that we need to recognize and get better, right? One of the things came up in the comments about tabletop exercises or tabletop discussion. That to me is one of the most undervalued. Now, as firefighters, we all sit there and go, that's the holy land, right? Everything kind of gets solved at the kitchen table. So we know it's impactful. It's impactful for us as officers, and it's impactful for the firefighters. So make it impactful, right? If you're that station officer, take value in that time. And Chief Moran, you brought it up perfect. Hey, guys, we had a call a couple hours ago. Let's talk about that one. That straightforward call or that complex medical, that has very strong value in it. Just that discussion with everyone's expertise. That's where we kind of, I don't want to say leave the rank on the side, but hey, what could we have all done better? You know, what could I have done better? What could you have done better? And the next time we face that, let's have a new game plan. But I can see the difficulty in some of your larger agencies where you have float people, you know, every time, every day, it's a different crew almost, or at least maybe 1 or 2 of them are different. And you almost need to go back to evaluate where they're at, right? You have daily training just to kind of get them to where they need to be. You know, are those some of the challenges you see, Chief Moran? I know, you know, working on shift, you know, you get different people, right, that are coming through or floating through. You know, how do you combat that from a training perspective?
So I actually am one of those guys that float through, because in my rank, junior guy.
Okay.
So, almost every day that I'm at work, I'm a different battalion, and I do the rounds, drive around and go see the guys and gals, and I see different people almost every day. Which is good because it gets you around and you get to see everybody. And, you know, you do get to kind of spread your certain type of vision or message. And, you know, you have an ability to spread good vibes that way too, you know, ask guys about the morale and all that other stuff, and just see how they're doing, and then talk about training like this. Like I said, we just literally I just came from a firehouse, just doing the rounds, visited with the captain, talked about family, kids, school, all that stuff, and then got into talking about high rises on the beach and a fire that the city had in December of last year that was a fatality, and all the things that went wrong during that fire and all the things that we were lucky with during that fire. And we talked about it. And I said, you know, I was just over here with another crew at the same firehouse a couple months ago, and they asked me to go to a building. They said, you know, we have a really challenging building in our zone that we've noticed on medical calls. And every time we go into it, we say to ourselves, this is going to be a bad fire. Where are we going to hook up our hose lines? What are the priorities? What are we going to do? What stairwell are we going to use and all that stuff? So we went to that building, and with street clothes on, met with security. Hey, can we use a stairwell for an hour? And sure, yeah, go use the stairwell. And we brought our hose lines up and connected to the standpipe and just stretched down the halls and talked about all the doors that they're going to have to keep open because it's, you know, an old building on the beach and they don't have standpipes in the stairwell. They're all in the hallways. So you have to come out of the hallway and you have lots of doors that you need to chalk. You're going to need extra hose because of the location of the standpipe valves. And, you know, just getting out there and seeing it is good. But sitting at the kitchen table with this captain who is talking to me about the exact same building, and I said, I know exactly what building you're talking about. I was just in that building 2 months ago with another shift, and this is what we talked about. So
let's go. Let's go do it.
Value in those table conversations, you know.
And that's great that you do that, you know. But is it shared with all 3 shifts, right? So you have some really strong company officers that value training, right? That, hey, we're going to train every single day, which is great. But it's not shared. Hey, we went up to this building and, from to the next captain or company officer or whatever it is, you're going to need this, this, and this. We kind of outlined it for you, or we walked through. You might want to take your crew over there, and this is what we saw. And then coming back and sharing those, best practice, type of thing. Captain Torlucci, do you have anything if company officers have that, and whether it be fire or EMS, right? We create those challenges. Do you have a mechanism to share those from officer to officer, shift to shift? How do you do that? By email? Is it just word of mouth? Is there a process, or everybody just going, hey, you know what we did yesterday?
It's usually word of mouth. Occasionally, some people will contact the training division and, send some ideas and like, maybe can we do a video? We're lucky that we have one amazing video department.
Right.
We can call them and they will they do all our training videos for us. So even our medical stuff, if Dr. Shepke, our medical director, has, something to say, he'll come in, shoot a video. We load it on Target Solutions. Same thing with, protocols. We'll do a protocol review, put questions on it. But we have an amazing video department that does a lot of that for us.
And that's great. As long as they know it's there, right? As long as they know what to do, you give them the objectives, they'll go make it happen. People, sometimes we don't share enough of that because there's definitely value in it. And I don't care if it's EMS, fire, best practices. We were challenged by this. We had this problem. We had this. That was, for those of us that have been around long enough, that's a Brunacini day of, hey, we're going to make mistakes. We better share all those mistakes. Not the glory is going to get out, right? The good things we did, everyone's going to know about. We have to make the bad things public to each other and say, hey, we screwed this one up. If you're faced with the same thing, don't mess this up, and this will help you and create training around that. That's not a bad thing. Like you said, Chief, you had a fire that could have gone very bad. It could have been a lot worse. So we need to look at that and say, hey, we got lucky here. Let's change this. We need to make everyone aware so we get better. It's okay to say we didn't do it perfect. We didn't. There's nobody that does.
You're right. That's exactly what I was just going to say. There is nobody that runs every incident perfectly, whether it's a medical or fire. And when you're able to sit back and self-reflect on something like that, then that's how you gain the experience. I tell guys all the time, you can have 10 years of time on the job or 20 years of time on the job. But if your time on the job is spent coming and going to work and not reflecting on how you could have done better the day before, then you're not gaining any kind of experience. If you go from call to call and not reflect on it and say, what could have I done better? Then you're not learning and you're not gaining that experience.
Right.
Yeah, there were a ton of lessons to learn from this fire that we had in December on the 9th floor. And it was a fatal fire, arson. And those are the ones that when you don't respond to them, you should be asking everybody who is there, hey, what did you guys do? And what did you learn that you could have done better? What went well? What didn't? And you learn from the ones that you don't go to just as much as the ones that you were a part of.
Right. As long as everybody's honest and saying, hey, we did this, these things happen. It's not a disciplinary thing. It's an education thing. Right. So, we need to talk about the things we do wrong and how do we do better. I think the issue, and Captain Torlucci or Rodriguez, feel free to chime in, but most firefighters, paramedics, clinicians in general are type A, right? We're proud of what we do and we're a little territorial of how well we do it, right? So when we have someone that wants to comment, or I don't want to say ridicule, but maybe critique, ask questions. What did you do and why did you do it this way? Unfortunately, a lot of time you're met with resistance. Well, you weren't there, you didn't know. That's not what I asked. Why are we doing it? Because I genuinely want to learn and make sure we all get better by doing it. So I think the first component in our service is we all, and there's many that do already, need to open up and say, hey, we're going to make mistakes. I'm going to share it. Ask me whatever you want to know and I'll tell you, and tell you where I went wrong. I mean, I know, for me, and we can pre-fire plan these things. We can have them. When I'm a battalion and I'm driving down the street, I can tell you, I can't look up at a pre-fire plan while I'm driving down the street. And sometimes if it's going bad quickly, you don't have time to get back on that computer and look up that pre-fire plan. You're in real time. Now you should know it beforehand if it's your zone, but Chief, and you guys are floating to different zones. You may have buildings you haven't seen or you haven't been in, and that's a big challenge. EMS is the same way, right? Where we are, you have certain people you respond to. Normally, you have a certain age group, right, that you see in certain zones. In our zone, we happen to, we deliver babies a lot. You go one zone over, and the mean age is 85. People don't deliver babies all the time. It's not the comfort zone, So, everyone has those expertise. So, as we talk about that and different zones and different things that people do, what do you guys think about bringing in outside people to train your personnel? And I'm not saying daily, but outside experts, so to speak. What's the benefits? What's the pros and cons? Captain Rodriguez.
For a small department, there is benefit to it with like an officer development style program.
Okay.
Small departments definitely will benefit from a third party, college or just a third party, because they have the credentials, they have the classes, the experts already teaching it. And on top of that, it's only going to benefit those firefighters, those officers, with credits and possibly increasing their education. So I do think that a third party college for fire officer development is beneficial. At least in a small department. Now, company training.
What's the cons?
I don't see too many cons on it. Not for fire officer development. They're for like the fire officer series, for instance.
Right.
I know we at North Lauderdale, we did do an in-house fire officer program, but it was tagged along with Broward College, and a lot of us young officers went through that series. Right. It was in-house, but we had someone with experience and the knowledge to teach those courses. As time goes by, you kind of start losing those individuals. So when you don't have those expert people teaching those classes, going to an outside agency is probably better.
Captain Torlucci, you guys don't use many outside educators in your training division, do you?
Absolutely. No, we do all the time.
Okay.
We bring, every time we do an officer candidate school, which one has going on right now, we'll have different people come in and do stuff. When we do our paramedic school, our 80-hour class, we'll have, Dr. Shepke, other doctors in the area come in and do lectures. This year we brought in this guy, Bob Norton, who was amazing to do leadership classes. He must have taught 15 leadership classes, and he was amazing. So,
right.
Yeah, we bring.
They're not as expensive as you think that they are in the perspective of what you're getting out of it, especially in company officer leadership. Those in company development. You have everyone in one room. It's not that they have to do 3 shifts. So there is challenges when you're going to do 3 shifts and different battalions. Then you have some obstacles. But if you're doing a company or officer development where they're all in a classroom, bringing outside expertise in, I feel is just a fresh perspective. As long as you vet them, of what you're looking for in your company development. Chief Moran, you were in the training division. Do you guys bring in a lot of outside people for things like that?
To be honest with you, we haven't really started bringing people in from the outside to do fire stuff like that. When it's convenient for people that we know, like if we know somebody's going to be in town, we'll try to see if they can come by and do something.
Right.
But we don't really reach out a whole lot. We probably could. We could bring people in a lot more than we do. I think, because of our annual expo, a lot of our outsiders come in for that. And we don't get other opportunities throughout the year. But we did, when I was in a training bureau, we did bring Jim McCormick down. And, we had a plot of land that we built containers on, basically, like some people call it the FDTN of the South.
Right.
Nowhere near that scale, but
Right.
A couple of the buildings that he has up there, he came down and gave us the schematics, and Chief Salzano had purchased the trailers. And we put all the containers together. We did all the work. We did welding. We did cutting. We cut doors. We cut windows. We stacked them on top of each other and built staircases and basically built out entire buildings. A whole apartment building with a staircase. And we do a lot of good, realistic training there. We light fires in there. We put smoke machines in it and just do searches. The opportunities out there are endless, and without bringing that expertise in from the outside, I mean, where do you even start on something like that? You have to bring them in, and like Jason said about having doctors come in, every single rookie class that we do, we usually have subject matter experts in EMS do certain trainings for them. Like we'll get them with the medical director and let him have the platform to talk to them. When I was in there, I used to call the rep for the IO company and say, hey, can you put on a class for me? And during COVID, that was difficult, but we still made it happen. We had the kids sitting in the room with a mask on their face and the person from the company on a Zoom showing them how the IOs work, so we make it work, whatever's going on, whether it's COVID or not, whether it's EMS or fire. If you don't bring in people from the outside, like, where do you really start to improve? And like you said, it's a fresh perspective sometimes too. A lot of the times guys in the departments, they just get sick of hearing the same person.
Yeah, for sure.
Hear somebody else say the same crap.
Yep.
It could be that.
Yeah, it's like talking to your kids, right? They get a coach tells them one thing, a parent tells them another, and they two different results.
Absolutely. That is the perfect analogy. Yep. A parent saying the same thing that a coach does, but they don't listen to the parent.
Right.
They do it, and you're like,
yeah,
I've been telling you to do that.
I've been telling you this for how long? Right, exactly. Yeah. So and you made up a great point is the vendors. The vendors want to demonstrate their equipment, right? They're the experts in that equipment. They have a sales pitch, but with that sales pitch is all of the usability of whatever. And I don't care if that's extrication tools or a BVM, right? And they're more than willing to come in and talk about those things and demonstrate those to you, the proper usage. And no matter who's in the room, go, wow, I didn't know it did that. We don't use it that way, right? And it changes the perspective. And those are at zero costs. So Captain Torlucci, and you don't have to answer because, it's not really financial. How many people do you guys have on overtime in a day? Roundabout.
Oh, God.
More than 10?
Probably about 50.
50 24-hour overtime slots.
Probably.
Give or take.
Yes.
So when I think of that.
When I was a staffing officer 3 years ago, we were doing at least 40 a day, depending on which rank it was. Battalion chiefs were always high. EMS captains were always high. And for a while, paramedics were a while because we didn't have enough paramedics.
Right. So when you're in the dozens of overtime shifts of 24 hours, to me, bringing someone in for 8 hours probably isn't going to break the bank. When you're a smaller agency, and sometimes you need that one or two people, to cover, and that's still 48 hours of overtime. That's real money. It impacts your budget. So I get it. You have to pick and choose of what you can bring in from the outside because it does cost things. But it gets back to sharing each other's resources. As long as it's not overdone, people are willing to do that for you. And for the smaller agencies that are watching, don't be afraid to reach out. Go to Fort Lauderdale Fire Expo, go to Orlando Fire Expo, go to FDIC, meet these experts and say, look, how much do you cost? If I want to bring you to my agency for 2 days, what would you charge us? You'd be surprised with most of these people are in the industry. They're not doing it for the money. Obviously you got to cover their cost and you got to do that type of thing. So, those are the things that all you got to do is ask. You'll be surprised, really, the resources that are out there, like Fort Lauderdale's cans. Most people in South Florida don't even know it exists besides Fort Lauderdale. Palm Beach, if you've never been to their training center, you go, wow. You look at that and say, look at these different things that we could do. Now, not to that stage, but people can do things if you give a little creativity. And we have the same creativity in the stations, right? People will build their own their tables, right? Their kitchen tables. They have talent in welding and construction and building. Well, why not just do this, right? Chief Moran, this is one of your cams here in Fort Lauderdale, I believe. So, it can be done at the cost of goods. A lot of the time the people want to put this together because it values us as training, whether that be EMS or fire or whatever that is, right? So you guys built this, right, Chief?
Yes, those are the containers that we did. Yep.
Yep. So people will take pride in this. Yeah, there's cost. I mean, containers cost money, wood costs money, but it's possible. So, as people are watching this, again, it's possible. Think outside the box. Now, I don't care what size of your agency that you have.
Yeah, have you ever seen these guys do stuff with Photoshop? You could have, an incident go down and somebody takes a picture from an incident. And next thing you know, there's pictures of guys at that incident, in a football stadium with their fire hat on and everything else. I mean, they're, like you said, people are very creative.
Yes.
If they can get that creative with their iPhones in their hand, think about what they could do when they put their mind to training.
Absolutely. And you know what? They'd appreciate it because that's more legacy as well, right? They create the legacy for the next people that come up, and the next groups almost try and one up them, right? If you walk into any fire academy, you have plaques from wall to wall from graduating classes making their mark. And what does the next group do? Try and one up that mark, right? So, if we had that same philosophy once you're in the firehouse or you're at the EMS agency, imagine where we could be, right? We can't wait for others to bring it to us because admin has their own stuff to do. Admin has admin stuff to do. The training is us, right? It affects us that are in the street. From an administrative level, I want to make sure it's done so I can check that box, Chief Moran. I want to make sure I can get my ISO. And for EMS, we want to be proficient, right? I want to have that training. But at the end of the day, the providers are the end users, so they need to get creative and almost implement some of this stuff. And that's where leadership comes in and doing it as often as possible. We tend to get caught up in some of the daily responsibilities, and that should be one of our highest priorities at all times, because that's what we do, right? We get paid to run calls. That should be that's the banner on top of the door as you leave the bay. Our highest priority is running calls. That's really, and the only way we get good at running calls is training, unless you're a high volume department. But then again, you need to critique what you're doing right or wrong in that volume. Those that run 2 calls a shift, you need to train. You won't be proficient. So take that downtime and train. But that kind of comes, again, back to leadership that's there. Awesome. I appreciate that. Good.
Yeah, that's definitely set by the company officer. That's one thing I try to preach to my crew is our priority is to run calls. A very close second is make sure we're ready for those calls.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And from the administrative level, it needs to make sure that we remove the barriers to make sure you are prepared to run those calls. What obstacles can we get out of the way for you so you can get better? Bringing outside people, getting props, getting equipment, letting you go out of service, whatever it takes to get you better, right? We don't need to be in front. Captain Torlucci, I mean, do you got your training division? I know they teach quite often, but I'm sure 3 out of the 4 or 5 days they're doing other administrative work, right? As opposed to, unless you have a recruit class going on.
Absolutely. They go out and teach, but yes, they still have their admin paperwork to get done too, which, takes a lot of time.
And who's going to teach after them? Chief Moran even said, we get tired of hearing the same person saying the same thing. I don't care how big you are. You only have 10 in the training division. So when training's coming, you're getting 1 out of 10, for the most part. And we want to bring in that fresh energy and face. And if I go to another agency and teach for a day, I can tell you I'm energized. I want to be there and I want to see those faces. And normally when I'm an outside person, it's a different setting in the room or in the street or in on the fire ground. And when it's your own guys, it immediately kind of lowers the stress level. It's a little bit more laid back, which can be very productive also, but it's still the same perspective. So I like the idea of moving people, even if it's within the same agency, kind of, hey, I'll take this one, and we switch, quite often, but you can't be an expert in all of them, right? So as we kind of move forward in this, when we talk about outside people, and we're changing the way that we're doing things in the fire service and EMS, and education is a high level, right? And that falls under training, right? We want a lot of our officers have to now be fire officers, 1, 2, 3. And we're talking the state of Florida. For those that are watching, we have like Pro Board, right? You can get officer levels. So it does exist nationally. But degrees are coming more and more for the people that are officer level. That we're looking for them to have degrees. Does that make them a better officer? Well, coming from a college, I would say maybe. Taking a math class or an algebra class, does it make you? Well, I think it makes you have a well-rounded focus on things. English, yes, you write reports, you're documenting, you're relaying information. Psychology, well, yeah, for sure. In what we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Sociology, those things are really important. Should it be required? Let's talk about those things. So we talk about training, because a lot of this falls within the training division, right? Putting that training out. What's your thoughts? And we'll just go right around. Chief Moran, when you talk about officers' requirement of either a fire officer level and or degrees, how can your training division assist that or kind of stay out of that?
How can they assist or stay out of it? I mean, the opportunity is there for them to get it.
Do you bring it in, or you just have them go get it? Do you bring those things into them or make them available to them in-house?
No, not in-house. We don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So
they have to take the classes on their own. And, you asked, the first part of the question was, do the degrees set them up to be a better officer? I think that's a very important question to ask because, and again, like my opinion, I don't know if somebody will be throwing darts at my back when I say this, but those certifications administratively, maybe it'll make you a better officer. Maybe you'll write reports better. Maybe you'll, be able to handle more administrative things more efficient and professionally. But does it make you a better officer? Like where do you draw the line when you say make you a better officer? Because in my opinion, that's got to come from that on the job experience, and the on the job experience of, again, like I said before, not coming to and from work every day, but coming to and from work and reflecting during each run, reflecting on the drive home in the morning. Like I referenced quite a bit, a story that a fire that I had that came in. It sounded like it was, BS right from the start. It sounded like it was a pot on the stove. Fire alarm going off for 45 minutes, and now the caller smells smoke. They don't think the person is home. So right off the bat, I have this mindset in my head that it's a pot on the stove. We talked earlier about junior guys floating around and being with different crews. I just happened to have a float driver and a float firefighter this day. So my normal mindset was skewed right from the start. I was calling it a pot on the stove from the beginning. I had a different driver, different firefighter. So when we pulled up to the building, that if I would have had my normal crew with, I would have said what we were going to do, and we would have went to work, and there would have been no questions about it. Instead, when we got there, the firefighter said, "Cap, you want me to stretch a line?" And I looked at where we were going, and I saw the caller waving at the bottom of a staircase of a 3-story building. It didn't have anything showing from it. And I told him, "No, let's just go see what this guy wants," because he's pointing and says, it's right here. We get up to the 3rd floor, and there's a pretty good smell of smoke, and it still smells like a pot in the stove. But when we're pushing on the door a little bit, you got puffs of smoke coming out. I called for a line to come up, and now when I call for a line coming up, I have a rescue from another firehouse that's pulling the hose line off of my fire engine. So a crew that I don't train with, a crew that's assigned on a daily basis to a rescue in the first place, and I'm with 2 different people that I usually don't work with. Everything was different. And when they stretched that hose line up to the door, if the place was on fire, I had about 10 feet of hose to get into a 2-bedroom apartment, and that was it, because they didn't stretch the line like me and my crew would have. So does the piece of paper make you a better officer, or seeing 10 feet of hose at a door to an apartment that has smoke coming out of it and saying, "Oh my God, we didn't train properly for this," or "I dropped the ball because I left my normal mode of operation based on the people that I'm working with, and now I don't have enough hose here." Those are the calls that make you a better officer, when you're able to realize you screwed up and you learn from it. And, I always said I would never do that again. The next time that same building has the exact same call and that guy saying, "It's right up here, I don't think there's anything on fire, but I started smelling smoke," right off the bat, all right, we're going to stretch a line and we need to extend the hose line. And that's what we would have done if I was with my crew. So those are the calls that make you a better officer. I don't think the piece of paper necessarily makes you a better officer in the street, but maybe inside the firehouse and maybe at a desk
Yeah,
would.
I mean, experience matters. Experience matters for sure, right? If we take every learning experience and apply it, when I look at, and we'll go around to Captain Rodriguez in a second, when I look at people that are taking all like the fire officer classes, well, and from a college perspective, we have people that transfer in those classes all the time towards degrees, and they took tactics 15 years ago or 10 years ago. Well, that's all changed. Now, has English changed or psychology or, but things change. So, it's not always going to be the biggest benefit. What about you, Captain Rodriguez? What do you think about fire office, like formal courses and fire officer levels and degrees for your officers?
I do agree with Chief Moran that it doesn't necessarily make you a better practical company officer. But in general, I think a combination of the experience with the education is going to make you a general better officer on not just on the street, but more importantly, sometimes the firehouse dealing with employee conflict and things like that, knowing how to effectively communicate with your personnel, so those things get spoken about in these classes. You're taking sociology, you're taking psychology and things like that, how to effectively speak with someone, sometimes you don't have to speak.
The service is going, right?
Yep.
Agreed or not agree, it's going that way. Captain Torlucci.
Well, since we partnered up with Braxton College over a year ago, I mean, our guys are getting all the state certifications they need. And again, I think it really depends on the person. Some people will go into a class and they will put, if it's a 40-hour class, they will put 40 hours in it. Then there's some will they just want the cert so they can get promoted. So it really depends on the person. But, with the online, since COVID, I mean, we haven't really done any in-person classes for the FFP classes anymore. No one really wants to teach 40 hours anymore. Right. So it's all moved to online education. But, for a department our size, I mean, we're offering 3-4 FFP classes a month. That's stress off us. Braxton does it we pay the bill, we upload, and we move on. So, but I think it really depends on the individual, what they want to put into it.
Yeah, I think that's with everything we get, right? Whether that be education, certification classes, or even experience. Do you take the opportunity to learn from every experience, not just the big fires, right? Learn from every experience and share that and share your experience. I'm looking at a screen here with, probably 100 years of time in doing this, right? So you have to take that and pass it along and make those appreciate not only where you've been, but how they can improve. Because again, no one's going to be perfect. Someone's got to be the one to push a little bit to get people a little bit better. Some are go-getters. They're going to want it from the very beginning. But there's some that just need a nudge. And whether that be a nudge on a fire ground, at the kitchen table, or in a classroom, you can get through to them and they're going to surprise you, given the opportunity. And that can take place in training. That's really giving them that responsibility. That's leadership 101, right? Giving people the opportunity to move forward, and they can do that. So, well, I appreciate your time. We've been at this for an hour now. It does go pretty quickly. So, just kind of closing, we'll go around and I want to thank you guys for spending a little bit of time with us again. This is an important topic. We can't cover everything. But here we are with a large city, small city, large county training, and everyone has the same issues, right? How can I implement it? What's the cost? Everyone's on ISO. How do I record these? So no matter where you're watching from, everyone has the same challenges, but you got to look outside of your box and utilize the resources that you have. We never want to say we can't do it. You absolutely can get it done. Fort Lauderdale built their own props, right? And goodness, if you can look at Palm Beach of what they've developed there, is they have a prop for just about anything you can think of that's there. They have a sinking house prop. That's probably the most impressive thing that I see. If no one's ever seen that, it's got a house about half the size and they flood it full of water. So you really only see the roof. So for USAR of how to get people out of floods and hurricanes, it's incredible. So, given an open canvas, we can do a lot of really cool things and make our personnel better. So, I'll pass the floor around. for you guys to comment of how you think that those that are watching can really improve their training division or the training of their personnel, I'm sure they'd appreciate the comments. So, Chief Moran?
Yeah, no, I just want thank you for the invite on. I greatly appreciate it, and I always enjoy talking shop.
Yep.
One of my favorite things to do, and really that real world experience and reflecting on what your last run just was and how you're going to do better on the next one. If the same exact thing happened, what would you do different? And I don't think that there's any call that comes in where somebody would say, I would do the exact same thing if that call happened right now.
Great point.
And that's always good because it shows that you're learning. And, that's where the training divisions can get that mindset out and just let the company officers know, like we've talked about, the company officers setting that tone. They do set the tone. And if you're just going to and from calls, you know what your driver is going to be doing. You know what the guy in the back seat is going to be doing. They're going to be going to and from calls also. And nobody's going to be talking. And one of the things that I always did was just talk. I talked like crazy in the truck, and I wanted the guys behind me, even if they were new, to talk also. It used to drive me nuts when I'd get a guy straight out of cadet school and he's on shift for the first couple of shifts and he's sitting in the back not saying anything. And he's like, oh, well, sir, they told me to, keep my mouth shut and listen. I have 1 years. And I said, oh, that's great. But, I want to know that I have a living, breathing firefighter in the back. When I'm up here just spitballing conversations about buildings out here, I'm sure that you have questions. Ask me questions. I want to know.
Yeah.
I want them to know what's in my head, and I want to know what's in their head. So when we roll up to something and I make a decision, everybody understands why I made the decision because we talk about everything. I just think sharing that mindset and talking and reflecting, and that's how you're going to, that's how company officers are going to help the training division too, because it'll make the training division's job easy when they put classes on, because they'll get a lot more input from the field as opposed to the training division needing to come up with all the content. Sometimes guys will bring stuff to the training bureau. Hey, I had this call. Maybe we should put something out on it.
That's great feedback. And hopefully all the company officers doing that. Hey, that we're seeing this out here. You might want to start spreading this departmental wide. Excellent. Thank you, Chief, very much. Captain Torlucci, your parting words.
Well, thank you for having me on here. Let me just say, Target Solutions and Evaluations is my expert. So if anyone ever needs help with Target Solutions or evals, please reach out to me. I share we have all our task books built out. So many other departments have borrowed our stuff. So borrow it from us. That's how it usually works. Someone borrows it from us and changes it up. So if anyone ever needs help with Target Solutions or evaluations, that's my wheelhouse. So please reach out to me.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Captain Rodriguez.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for having me, Chief McGrath. Appreciate it. For all the company officers out there, really just, make sure you make the time, be that leader that, gives your personnel have the desire to want to train and know their job well. That's the biggest thing. Because at the end of the day, we're here to serve the community. And if we're not training to be ready for whatever call we get, we're doing it in service.
Great. That's great. I would echo all three of your comments. To me, again, reach out. If you don't have the resources, find them. If you don't think you could afford it, you don't know till you ask. In all honesty, and that doesn't mean just from a college. That could be from anywhere, right? Just the experts in your field. You'll be surprised the support you get, because everyone's in the same boat, and anyone in this field, fire and EMS, want to help each other. At the end of the day, we want all of the services to be the best that they can be. So, don't live in that box. Get out of the box and ask for help, and you'll be surprised what you can get out of your training, regardless of your budget, to get it done. So I appreciate the three of you for coming on. If anyone ever had any questions for us, I know our website is going across the board. There's a contact us on the website. If we can help in any way or put you in contact with anyone, please let us know. If you have ideas for future podcasts, please send them our way. There's an email at info@braxton.edu. And, tell us what you want to hear, and we'll put a panel together and deliver it to you. So thank you guys again. Everybody have a great night. Be safe. And if you're not on the next one, have a great holiday.